Over the last 2 years, crop circles have begun to grow increasingly and spectacularly complex. In 1990, 1/3 of the circles in Wiltshire were these complex shapes, so-called pictograms. By this year, the overwhelming majority of the circles in Wiltshire were pictograms. This has caused a new controversy to blow up over Meaden's explanation that plasma vortices are responsible.
The problem about the crop formations is that they started in a very small way 10 years ago, and they have been growing in elaboration. You can trace patterns of development over the succeeding years. In the last 2 years, they've become enormous. They've become immensely complicated. And nature as a whole doesn't perform like this in this sort of way with this sort of thing. Now, if this is say, let us argue, a wind formation, a very strange sort of wind, let's say, call it the plasma vortex effect. Now, if the plasma vortex effect is a true hypothesis, it should have been going on for thousands of years. There should have been formations like this all over England and the world, seen by people and recorded for hundreds of years. And yet there's no evidence at all that this is the case. So we are dealing with something that's quite different from a natural effect of nature. And this is why I think we have to move into a new paradigm, which involves intelligence, something purposive, and something quite different from what we are used to in the late 20th century.
In 1990, a new organisation was set up to monitor the circles and look for new explanations.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the summer conference of the Centre for Crop Circle Studies.
The Centre for Crop Circle Studies, or CCCS, which now has 950 members, is the brainchild of 2 men. Michael Green, the chairman, is an archaeologist working for English Heritage. And Ralph Noyes, the secretary, is a retired under-secretary from the Ministry of Defence. Both had developed a fascination with the circles, but found themselves dissatisfied with Meaden's scientific explanation.
I think the decisive moment for me was the moment in 1986 when these circles, which had begun to group themselves into quite interesting patterns, for the first time put a ring around themselves. We had a ring circle. Terence, I think, found this very surprising, and he had to elaborate his model quite a bit. And I began to feel we really have got a most interesting race between a good scientist and a developing phenomenon. In 1989, we had, right at the end of that year, a very big rotational event divided into 4 quadrants, in each of which the grain was combed out in a linear manner, turning at right angles in each quadrant. And I said to myself and to friends, that cannot be simply an atmospheric vortex, however elaborate Terence is making it. Let us have a look at this thing.
The point is that
CCCS acts as an umbrella organisation for all those who lean towards a parascientific explanation. Some continue to believe the circles derive from spiritual force fields like ley lines. But influential members at the core of the organisation are developing an alternative theory, that the circles are the work of non-human intelligences.
You've actually recorded this scientifically.
a lot of people are looking for messages in the corn, as it were, nowadays. I'm tempted almost to say corny messages. Now, I think one has to put oneself in the shoes, if that's not too far-fetched a term, for an intelligence coming from outside. How would you try and communicate with a skeptical, unbelieving human public? One of the ways I think I would try would be not be to write great big letters, "We are here, we love you," across the middle of the fields of England. And I think one positive way, a timeless way, is to use something which they call in the East a mandala. Now, this is a symbol of reality, a symbol of being, a symbol of God. And most of the formations that we've been looking at this year and here are, in fact, great symbols in this sense.
Those who believe this theory argue it hasn't been arrived at lightly. As well as rejecting the plasma vortex hypothesis, CCCS examines other possibilities like electromagnetic or agricultural change. They believe that such phenomena cannot on their own explain the circles and are forced to conclude a non-human intelligence can be the only possible explanation. When this para-scientific theory began to surface, Terence Meaden immediately dismissed it. He explained pictograms scientifically, making only a relatively minor modification to his theory. He suggested that sunspots, solar storms which cause intense electrical activity in the upper atmosphere and which have an 11-year cycle that peaked in 1990, were exaggerating the unstable behavior of his plasma vortices.
I'm merely suggesting that in addition, there could be Earth circulating currents induced by the upper air currents, which in turn affect locally the electric field of the Earth, and hence play a role too in the stability or instability of the vortices that make the circles.
Meaden's modification failed to convince the parascientists, who argued that while violent solar events may well wreak havoc on Earth, it's inherently implausible that they could effect designer damage. Science and parascience continue to be locked in conflict, leaving many locals who've experienced crop circles at first hand uncertain what to think.
Quite nice.
Yes. I think this was probably standing up a little bit when it was formed. A little bit like that, I would guess.
Yes, it would have been.
And that's now been knocked over by people walking on it.
Terence Meaden and CCCS field officer Dowser Richard Andrews both try to win Farmer Robin Butler over to their understanding of the cause of pictograms. He's had 27 simple circles before, but this is his first pictogram.
It seems from the dowsing point of view that when we have a three-line lay, as we call it, goes across the portion of the dumbbell at 90 degrees to this pattern, it seems we get boxes. And if that isn't there, there isn't a box. So these are sort of the things that we're beginning to learn now, which is helping us both, really, isn't it?
Indeed, yes.
The apparent inability of both science and parascience to prove their case conclusively, and the strange and sudden complexity of the pictograms, however, has encouraged a third theory to emerge with particular force over the last couple of years.
But if we move over to the edges, you'll see that...
I think the cause of crop circles is human beings. I think every single one has been made by a so-called hoaxer who's gone out and done it at dead of night or whatever.
You're looking for a few of the RAF military types, I think, you know. They like that sort of thing. I'm ex-military myself, and I would like to have a bash at something like that.
I'm certain someone stands in the middle with a piece of wood and a rope and goes around. I mean, I was born on a farm. I was brought up on a farm all my life. 100% country, hate town, but never in this wide world is that little green man.
Therefore, you come round to the other theory. They can't be little men. They must be big, large countrymen.
The young farmers. They know exactly what they're doing, so they do the minimum amount of damage, and that's a bit unfair. I better go away before I say any more. My son-in-law's a young farmer.
But originally, the circles or rings here in this photograph are not hoaxing. But the other extra pattern will be hoaxing. This, I think it's impossible to create such a very complicated patterns by plasma vortex.